Okay, Philippians 4:19 says, "My God will liberally supply all your needs according to his riches and glory, Christ Jesus." When I was a little girl, I probably took more naps under the pew, in the pew, than I did at home. My parents were always real active in the church. My daddy literally helped build the church building. Anyway, as I got older, a teenager, I kind of strayed away. No, I did stray away from the Lord. And Carl and I were married a few years, so we made a decision to move back to my hometown, my hometown, so that we could get back in my home church. And that's when our life, drastically changed. I put on a roast and told Carl, because he said he would not go to church with me. He wasn't a believer. And I said, "If you'll check the roast," and he said, "What are you talking about? I'm going to church with you." So he was saved the first Sunday that we went back to church. That I went back to church. We had two babies, a 2.5-year-old and a 4.5-year-old at that time. This is when my faith walk started. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
We made a decision to where for 5 months we only had $5 a week for groceries and gasoline so that we could get back in church. But God always supplied our needs. One day I got to the point where I had not one crumb of anything in the pantry, but I wasn't worried. And about 10 o'clock that morning, my cousin called and she said, "Sarah, would you happen to know if anybody that needs commodities?" She said, "I have a lot of commodities that I can't use." And I just went to screaming and having a fit and praising the Lord, because I knew that God supplied that. So that cinched it for the rest of my life. I knew that always, always, always he would supply our needs. Carl and I've always served the church in various capacities. I did nursery for like 42 years. He did mass ministry, and he actually helped build. He did the dirt work on their new church that they built. In 1999, and I've skipped a lot of years, probably 20 years here, I've skipped. But in 98, we bought our retirement home north of Tahlequah. And it wasn't but just a few months until we realized he had a eye problem. This man had never been sick in his life. So we discovered that he had a pituitary tumor, and they usually find them when they're half the size of a BB, and his size was a grapefruit, and it was spreading the bones in his face even. They showed me the pictures. So anyway, they went and surgically removed. We went home in 3 days, and he could see, his vision was only down to a straw in each eye. And when we went home, he could read the fine print on things that I couldn't read with my glasses. So God miraculously restored his vision and his health that way. Then 8 months later, he was taking down a tree in our yard using a tractor, and he bumped the tree with the bucket on the tractor, and it broke it off about 12 foot long, about 18 inches around, and it came down and hit him in the top of the head. It laid his head open, a big 3-corner hole, and that wasn't the worst of it. It broke his back. Then in 04, Carl was having some kind of funny symptoms, and I've always kind of been tuned into things, and I thought, he needs help physically right now. So I called for an appointment. They said, "Oh, it'll be 30 days before we can get him in." And I said, "That won't work." So I took him, and I could see him paralyzing as we were driving an hour to the hospital. I could see him paralyzing. They put him in ER and did tests, and they said they thought he'd had a stroke. Well, that wasn't the fact after they got the test back. So when the doctor went to do the neurological test, He said, stand up. Carl couldn't stand up. And so the doctor and I went under his arms and stood him up on his feet. And as soon as we turned loose of him, he went to the floor just like a wet dish rag. And so he had Guillain-Barré syndrome. I had never heard of that before, but he was paralyzed from his toes to the top of his head, even the pupils of his eyes. He was in ICU in Tulsa for 3 weeks. They tried every treatment there was, and the treatments just seemed to make him worse. So they sent him back to Muskogee. He was there for 6 weeks, and all this time he's on a ventilator. All of his organs had shut down except for his heart. They weaned him off the ventilator and then shipped us by ambulance to Fort Roots, the VA rehab center, and he was there 5 months. This was a total of 7 months. He was in the hospital. So the doctor told us when we left, he was still in an electric wheelchair, still had to have his head held up because he couldn't hold his head up yet, that he will recover enough to take care of his personal needs, but that's all. And I looked the doctor in the eye just like I'm looking you in the eye and said, that may be what you say, but that does not make it so. So we came home and he had therapy and he did therapy at home. After 2 years, we went back to the doctor. We'd been back once since. But in 2 years, we went back and he wheeled his wheelchair up to the doctor, got out of it, and walked probably very far to the door. And the doctor just bawled like a baby. And he said, it's God. There's no other way that this man could have recovered except God. So then Carl has this thing, well, God gave me back my life, so I'm going to give back to him. So he started working at the church, and he remodeled the church all by himself. And he worked there 9 to 4, 9 to 5, 4 days a week for years, probably 10 years at least. We had a food pantry, and he was the one that always organized and got the food and kept it rotated and all those things, did all the maintenance on the building until a couple years ago. The trees are not his friends. We were in the woods and a tree fell on him and broke his back. Now this time he's 81 years old and the doctor said, we're going to do therapy and see if it'll heal. Well, it didn't. He said it was worse after the 6 weeks than it was when it first happened. So he said, at first he told us there's no way we can do surgery because his back was so crushed that there was nothing to screw, tie, rod to. And then he said, the only choice we have is to do surgery and just do what we can do. Well, as you can see, he came out of that okay. And he's gone downhill a little bit since then even. But he, and I've got off on him and I don't mean to do that, but that's a great need that we've had, that God would take care of him. 11, he was having an EKG, just a regular exam, and they found that he needed a 5 bypass open heart surgery, and he whizzed through just like it was nothing to it. So through many years of tests and trials of patience and things, I've hung on to God and his word. We have hung on to God and his word, and faithfulness is amazing. God's given us insight, understanding, and the tenacity in my life to live, support, and walk through events in our life. God continues to provide. I've learned that the past few years about budgeting, and you don't believe old dogs can learn new tricks. Well, they can. A couple of years ago, we had to purchase a different car. And I thought, how in the world will we ever do that? But with determination and learning budgeting better, God provided the finances, and we paid that car off in 8 months. Amen. It was God, not me, not us. And that was 2 days before we closed on our home here in Covita. And that was another miracle. So we lived in the country out in the middle of nowhere. And a realtor came by one day. Carl was out mowing, and they said, handed him a business card and said, if you know of anybody in this area that's ready to sell, that she'd love to talk to him. And Carl and I had talked about that because he was getting so he couldn't take care of our property. We had acres, and then the lady next door to us was a widow lady who took care of all her property. And so we called the realtor, and we decided to put our house up for sale, and it sold in 13 days, which was shocking and amazing to us. And we had talked about a home that was just down one door from our son's, but we thought, that house will never come available. Carl had always said he wanted the house, but I said I didn't. But they had lived there for over 40 years, and the man died, so they put the lady in an assisted living. And who did they call to help them move her? Our son and daughter-in-law. So they said, will you give us first choice on this home? Which they did. So we was able to purchase the home just a door down for my son, which is really, really nice in the Broken Arrow, Coweta area. There's a few things, okay, I missed something I want to go back to. That was when a new chapter in our life started again. Our new house needed repairs much more than we expected, so we're sharing our son's home until it's ready to move into. We're finding enjoyment, living with family, as well as the opportunity for flexibility. Once we transitioned to Coweta area, we began looking for a new church home. Without it, there was a huge hole in needs in our lives. We tried several churches, and there just wasn't a fit for us. Eventually, we found Abundant Rain. And I told you a while ago what a blessing it has been to us. There's a couple of things that I'd like to share with you because you might need it someday. When someone's sick, they need an advocate. They need someone to push and look over and tend to and see about them and their needs. And then final preparations for legal paperwork needs to be addressed well in advance of needing it. In my experience with my daddy, he was in the hospital 3 months. He died the first day when they did surgery. He begged me, sis, don't let them keep me alive on a machine. Okay, Daddy. So they went to the nurse's station to get the papers. Nurse said, I'll be right back with the papers for him to sign, and I did not stay to make sure that those papers were signed. So that gave them permission to do anything they wanted to that man. That's all I'll say about that. He was in ICU for 3 months. You need a will, a medical power of attorney, and then a mental power of attorney, advanced directive. A lot of doctors now, when I went the other day to establish a doctor here, they gave me papers for advanced directive, which I already had one. That will save lots of heartaches and thousands of dollars if those things are in order. Throughout my life, not all my jobs suited me, I thought, but I worked hard at them and learned while doing them. Now I look back. Those times educated me for situations and jobs in the future. God uses each thing in our lives, preparing us to be used. God always provides for every need we have, always and always will. Philippians 4:19, which I read that to you before, and then Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Also, I didn't get that in when I wanted to, but Eunice touched on that about tithes. If you'll give God his 10%, he'll do miracles with the rest of it. He'll protect. You know, there's a verse that says that he will protect what you have if you'll just give him. He'll protect it from the devourer if you'll just give him what's his. And we've always done that. Today even, I would choose, if I did not have enough to pay bills or to pay my tithes, I would pay my tithes knowing that he was going to provide what it was that we needed.